Commander Veltari of the Zephyrian Empire sat motionless in the stark white interrogation chamber, her once gleaming silver scales now dull and cracked from the recent battle. Energy restraints hummed around her wrists and ankles, casting a faint blue glow across her reptilian features. The human research vessel, Harmony's Edge, drifted silently through space, its hull scarred from the fierce engagement that had ended just hours ago. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and Captain Kim Dae-ho stepped inside. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen too many battles, his dark eyes taking in every detail of his prisoner. The captain wore a simple grey uniform, no medals or insignia to mark his achievements. He didn't need them. Everyone in the galaxy knew what humans could do now. Dae-ho pulled out a chair and sat across from Veltari, placing a small voice recorder on the metal table between them. The device was sleek and black, completely silent except for the tiny red light that indicated it was ready to capture every word. "Your fleet was obliterated in 6 hours," Dae-ho said, his voice calm and matter-of-fact. 300 Zephyrian warships, the pride of your empire, all destroyed or captured. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle in the air. The mighty Zephyrian Empire, conquerors of 40 worlds, defeated by what you called primitive humans just 2 decades ago. Veltari's head lifted slowly, her reptilian eyes focusing on the human captain with an intensity that would have made most beings uncomfortable. Her forked tongue flicked out briefly, tasting the recycled air of the ship. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded fleets across star systems. "You think this was about conquest?" she asked, her voice a low hiss. "You believe we came to your little colonies for resources or territory?" A bitter laugh escaped her throat, sounding more like the growl of a predator. "Foolish human. You understand nothing." The captain leaned back in his chair, studying her face. "Then explain it to me. Help me understand why the Zephyrian Empire suddenly decided to attack human settlements. We've had peaceful relations for 15 years. Our trade agreements were profitable for both sides." "Peaceful relations," Veltari repeated, her eyes narrowing to slits. "Is that what you call it?" She tested her restraints briefly, the energy bonds crackling as they held firm. "You want to know why we attacked? Why every civilized species in the galaxy fears your kind more than the void spawn of the Outer Rim. Why the ancient Chromalian Empire, rulers of space for 3,000 years, now refuses to meet with human diplomats." Dae-ho remained silent, waiting. He had learned that patience was often the best interrogation technique. Let them talk. Let them reveal more than they intended. Veltari leaned forward as much as her restraints would allow, her scaled face coming closer to the table. "Very well, human. I will tell you everything, but know this." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper, each word carefully chosen. "Once you understand what your species truly is, once you see the galaxy through our eyes, you will never sleep peacefully again. You will look at your fellow humans and wonder which ones are the architects and which ones are the unwitting tools." The recording device hummed softly as it activated, its red light now blinking steadily. Outside the interrogation chamber's single porthole, stars streaked past as the ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying them away from the debris field that had once been the Zephyrian assault fleet. "It began 20 years ago," Veltari started, her voice taking on the cadence of someone recounting a tale that had haunted her dreams. "So when your kind first stumbled out of your little solar system in those crude ships you were so proud of, we watched you through our long-range sensors, these new creatures who had just discovered faster-than-light travel." She paused, her eyes growing distant as she remembered. "Your ships were pathetic compared to ours, bulky, inefficient, held together with what looked like salvaged parts and desperate hope. We had vessels that could cross the galaxy in days, while yours took months to travel between nearby systems. Your weapons were projectile-based kinetics when we had perfected energy manipulation for centuries." Dae-ho's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Interest, perhaps, or recognition. "The Galactic Council was amused," Veltari continued. "Another young species taking their first steps into the greater universe. It happens every few decades. Most burn out quickly, destroy themselves with technology they're not ready for, or simply fade away when they realize how vast and dangerous space truly is." She shifted in her restraints, the movement causing the energy bonds to flicker momentarily. But you humans were different. From the very first moment your ambassador stepped onto Nexus Station, something felt wrong. Not obviously wrong. Nothing. We could point to and say, there, that's the threat. Just a feeling like watching a predator pretend to be prey. The interrogation chamber fell silent, except for the soft hum of the ship's engines and the quiet whisper of the life support systems. Captain Dayho waited, knowing that the real story was just beginning. 20 years ago, your ambassador Park, Ajin Wu arrived at the Galactic Council, Veltari continued, her voice taking on a different tone. I was there that day, standing in the observation deck of the Grand Assembly Hall on Nexus Prime. The hall itself was a marvel of engineering, a massive dome that could hold representatives from 1,000 different worlds, each section adjusted for different atmospheric needs. She paused, her reptilian eyes growing distant as she remembered. Park Jin-woo stepped off that primitive human transport ship, wearing a simple black suit, nothing fancy or impressive. He looked so small next to the Carathian delegates with their powered exoskeletons, or the towering Vexani crystal beings who sparkled like living diamonds. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, respectful. He bowed to everyone, even the junior. Clerks! Captain Dayho remained silent, but his fingers drummed once against the table. Veltari noticed the small gesture. He seemed so harmless, she said, almost to herself, eager to please, grateful for any scraps of knowledge we threw your way. When the council members spoke, he listened with such attention, taking notes on an actual paper tablet, not even a digital device. We thought it was charming, this primitive species still using physical writing materials. The Zephyrian commander's scales shifted color slightly, a sign of agitation among her people. But Park Jin-woo asked questions, simple questions, the kind a child might ask. How does the council decide on trade routes? What happens when two species disagree about mining rights? Who settles disputes between member worlds? We answered him patiently, the way you might explain basic mathematics to a curious youngster. Leaned forward again, her restraints humming with energy. Within a month, Captain Lee So-min arrived with the first human cultural exchange mission. She was different from Park Jin-woo, more outgoing, more confident. She brought recordings of Earth's music, samples of your literature, even some of your historical art pieces. The council delegates were fascinated. Veltari's voice grew warmer. As she remembered, I attended one of Lee So-min's presentations myself. She played something called classical music, pieces by composers with names like Mozart and Beethoven. The melodies were unlike anything we had heard before, complex but somehow universal. Even the Vexani crystal beings who communicate through harmonic frequencies were moved by your music. The memory seemed to pain her now. Lee So-min would sit in the council chambers for hours, sharing stories about Earth's history, your wars and peace treaties, your art and science. She spoke about human emotions with such passion that even the logical Andromedans began to understand concepts like love and sacrifice. We thought you were sharing your deepest cultural treasures with us out of friendship. Captain Dayho's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Veltari caught it immediately. You're beginning to understand, she said softly. Lee So-min wasn't just sharing culture. She was learning ours. Every story we told her about our own histories, every casual mention of how our governments worked, every detail about our military traditions and social structures. She absorbed it all like a sponge, asking follow-up questions that seemed innocent but drew out more and more information. The interrogation chamber's lights dimmed slightly as the ship's power systems adjusted for hyperspace travel. In the softer lighting, Veltari's scales seemed to shimmer with their own inner light. Then came Dr. Cho Min-ho, she continued, a medical researcher or so we thought. He arrived with a small team of human doctors and scientists, offering to share Earth's medical knowledge freely. No payment required, no trade agreements necessary. Just goodwill between species. Her voice grew bitter. The galaxy's medical community welcomed him with open arms. Here was a species willing to share their healing knowledge without asking for anything in return but friendship. Dr. Cho Min-ho set up clinics on 12 different worlds, treating diseases that had plagued Various species for generations. Veltari's eyes fixed on Captain Deho. But those clinics were perfectly positioned, weren't they? One near the Carathian Military Academy, another close to the Andromedans' research facilities, a third right next to the Vexani diplomatic quarter. Dr. Cho Minho and his team had access to members of every major species government's military and scientific communities. The realization had clearly haunted her for years. While they were treating our illnesses, they were studying us, learning our biological weaknesses, our genetic structures, our physiological responses to stress and fear. They claimed it was necessary for proper medical treatment, and we believed them. She shifted in her restraints, the movement causing the energy bonds to flicker briefly. The council was so impressed with human generosity that we decided to make you an offer. The standard arrangement we give to all promising young species. Her voice dropped to a whisper. We offered you the standard arrangement. Become our client. Species. Pay tribute, follow our laws, and we would protect you from the darker corners of space. The void spawn that hunt in the outer rim, the rogue AI collectives that consume entire star systems, the ancient machines that wake up hungry every few centuries. Veltari's laugh was hollow. Your President Yun Hai-Wan accepted with such humble gratitude. He thanked the Council for their wisdom and protection, promised that humanity would be loyal and obedient clients. We thought you were simple creatures, content to be pets in the galactic community. The ship shuddered slightly as it dropped out of hyperspace, but neither the captain nor his prisoner seemed to notice. What we failed to realize, Veltari said, her voice growing stronger, was that every conversation, every cultural exchange, every medical consultation was carefully planned. Your delegates never asked direct questions about military capabilities or government secrets. Instead, they asked about history, culture, philosophy. They learned how we thought, how we made decisions, what motivated us. Her reptilian eyes seemed to glow in the dim light. By the time we understood what you were really doing, it was far too late. The Nexus War changed everything, Veltari hissed, her scales darkening to a deep bronze color that signaled intense emotion among her people. I commanded a patrol fleet in the outer sectors when it began, a simple territorial dispute between the Korath Empire and the Voidborn Collective over the Kepler 442 system. She paused, her clawed fingers flexing against her restraints. The Korath claimed mining rights to the asteroid fields rich in quantum crystals. The Voidborn said those same asteroids contained their ancestral burial sites, sacred ground that couldn't be disturbed. Standard galactic law was clear. Such disputes get resolved through dominance protocols. Captain Deho leaned forward slightly. Dominance protocols? Combat trials, Veltari explained. Each side sends their finest warriors to fight in designated space. Winner takes the disputed territory. Clean, simple, final. The Korath had already selected their champion, a massive dreadnought called Iron Fang, with enough firepower to crack a moon. The Voidborn had chosen their ghost ship, Silent. Hunger, a vessel that could phase in and out of normal space. Her voice grew distant as she remembered. The battle was set to take place in neutral space near the Proxima relay station. Gambling syndicates across 3 sectors were taking bets. Everyone expected the Korath to win. Their military technology was superior, their tactics more aggressive. But then something unexpected happened. The ship's intercom crackled briefly with routine status updates, but neither occupant of the interrogation chamber paid attention. Ambassador Song Yu-jin arrived at the Proxima station 3 days before the scheduled combat, Veltari continued. She came in a small diplomatic courier, the kind of ship you'd use for minor trade negotiations. No weapons, minimal shielding, a crew of maybe 20 humans total. The station commander almost didn't let her dock. Veltari's eyes narrowed as she recalled the events. Song Yu-jin requested permission to speak with both sides before the battle. The Korath war chief laughed at her, said humans had no business interfering in warrior matters. The Voidborn collective mind was more polite, but equally dismissive. They told her that flesh beings couldn't understand the spiritual significance of their sacred sites. The Zephyrian commander shifted position, causing her restraints to hum louder. But Song Yu-jin was persistent. She asked to tour the disputed asteroid field, claiming she wanted to understand both sides' positions better. The Korath thought it was amusing. This tiny human woman floating around in a basic survey pod, taking readings and samples. They even gave her an escort, treating it like entertainment. Captain Deho remained silent, but his attention was completely focused on every word. What happened next should have been impossible, Veltari said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. Song Yu-jin spent 18 hours in that asteroid field, mapping every rock, every mineral deposit, every void-born shrine marker. When she emerged, she called for an emergency meeting between both sides. The memory clearly still amazed her. She presented her findings with such confidence, such detailed knowledge of both cultures. She showed the Korath mining engineers exactly where the richest quantum crystal veins were located. Then she showed the void-born spiritual leaders that their most sacred burial sites were in completely different asteroids, ones the Korath had no interest in mining. Veltari's scales shifted color again, this time to a mixture of admiration and fear. But that wasn't the genius part. Song Yu-jin then proposed a solution that somehow gave each side exactly what they wanted. The Korath got exclusive mining rights to the crystal-rich asteroids. The Voidborn got permanent protection for their sacred sites. Both sides would profit from the arrangement. She leaned forward as much as her restraints would allow. The treaty was signed within a week. No battle, no bloodshed, no losers. Everyone walked away happy, praising human wisdom and fairness. The galactic media called it a triumph of diplomacy over violence. Captain Deho's expression remained carefully neutral, but Veltari caught the slight tension in his shoulders. Only later did we realize the genius of it, she admitted grudgingly. The Korath got their mining rights, true enough. The Voidborn kept their sacred sites, exactly as promised. But the shipping lanes between the asteroid field and the major trade routes, the hyperspace relay points that controlled all traffic through that sector, those fell under human-neutral administration. The interrogation chamber fell silent, except for the hum of the ship's engines. Outside the porthole, stars wheeled slowly as the vessel adjusted course. Song Yu-jin had studied the conflict for months before she ever arrived, Veltari continued. She knew the real value wasn't in the crystals or the burial sites. It was in controlling the space lanes that connected 6 major star systems. Every ship that wanted to travel through that region now had to get human approval, follow human traffic control, pay human administrative fees. Her voice grew bitter. And we celebrated her success. The Council awarded Song Yu-jin the Order of Galactic Peace. Other species started requesting human mediators for their own disputes. Within 5 years, you had neutral human administrators controlling critical infrastructure in 47 star systems. Veltari's eyes fixed on Captain Deho with laser intensity. That's when the pattern became clear. The Rigel mining dispute. Humans ended up controlling the refinery stations. The Centauri water rights conflict. Human peacekeepers took over the distribution networks. The Tau Ceti trade war. Human arbitrators somehow gained oversight of the commercial databases that tracked every transaction in 3 sectors. She shook her head slowly. Wherever humans mediated, traded, or offered assistance, you somehow ended up controlling key resources, information networks, or strategic positions. Always through seemingly benevolent means. Always with the grateful consent of everyone involved. The key, ship's lights flickered momentarily, as power was diverted to the hyperspace engines. In that brief darkness, Veltari's scaled face looked almost ghostly. "Your species weaponized kindness itself," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of horror and admiration. "You made us want to give you control. You made us believe it was our idea." Veltari's voice dropped to a whisper, and Captain Deho had to lean closer to hear her words over the ship's ambient hum. By the time we understood what was happening, it was already too late. Colonel Park Min-soo had been conducting what he called scientific research expeditions for 8 years. His ships were small, unassuming vessels that looked more like mobile laboratories than military scouts. Her scaled fingers drummed against the table despite her restraints. Park Min-soo was everywhere. His expedition teams would arrive at remote star systems, always with official permission from the local authorities. They studied stellar phenomena, mapped gravitational anomalies, catalogued exotic matter concentrations. Harmless scientific research, or so we thought. The Zephyrian commander's eyes grew distant as she recalled those years. I encountered one of his teams myself. About 7 years ago, my patrol squadron was investigating strange energy readings near the Vega Nebula when we found his research vessel, Scientific Progress, taking readings near an unstable wormhole. Park Min-soo was polite, professional. He shared his data freely, even warned us about dangerous gravitational shifts that could tear our ships apart. She paused, her expression darkening. What we didn't realize was that those research expeditions had systematically mapped every hyperlane, every shortcut, every hidden route between star systems. Park Min-soo's teams knew the galaxy's transportation network better than the species, who had been using those routes for thousands of years. Captain Daeho remained motionless, but his breathing had become more controlled, more deliberate. Then there was Dr. Kim Hye-jin, Veltari continued, her voice gaining strength. The galaxy's miracle worker, they called her. Wherever disease struck, wherever medical crises emerged, Dr. Kim would arrive with her teams of human doctors and advanced medical equipment. The plague outbreak on Rigel 7, the genetic virus that nearly wiped out the Cetian colonies, the strange radiation sickness affecting the crystal miners of Tau Ceti. Her scales shifted to a deeper shade of bronze. Dr. Kim's medical missions saved millions of lives across dozens of worlds. Every species in the galaxy owed humanity a debt of gratitude. But those medical facilities she established, they were perfectly positioned. One overlooking the Andromedian Defense Headquarters on their capital world, another within sensor range of the Carathian Weapons Research Facility, a third right next to the Vexani Diplomatic Complex where the crystal beings conducted their most sensitive negotiations. The ship shuddered slightly as it changed course, but neither occupant of the interrogation chamber seemed to notice. The medical stations were equipped with the most advanced communication arrays, supposedly for emergency coordination between facilities, Veltari explained. But those same arrays were capable of intercepting and analyzing virtually any form of electronic communication within a 50-light-year radius. Dr. Kim's healing centers had become the perfect spy network. She leaned forward again, her reptilian features intense in the chamber's artificial light. And your cultural exchange programs. Oh, those were masterful. Young humans eager to learn about alien cultures, living among us for years at a time. They were so enthusiastic, so genuinely interested in our histories, our art, our ways of thinking. Veltari's voice grew bitter. Exchange student Yu Seon-ho spent 3 years studying Zephyrian military traditions at our war college. We thought he was writing a dissertation on comparative combat philosophy. Exchange researcher Choi Yoon-ji lived among the Voidborn Collective for 5 years, learning their spiritual practices and decision-making processes. Cultural observer Nam Ji-woo was embedded with the Carathian Diplomatic Corps, attending their most sensitive strategy sessions. The implications hung heavy in the air between them. These weren't students or researchers, she said quietly. They were observers, human intelligence operatives placed in our governments, our militaries, our most secret councils, and we welcomed them with open arms, proud to share our cultures with such appreciative guests. Captain Daeho's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly, but he remained silent. The awakening came slowly, Veltari continued. First, the Andromedian High Council noticed that their classified research projects kept having mysterious setbacks whenever they might have given them military advantages over human-mediated territories. Then the Carathian war chiefs realized that their secret battle plans were somehow being anticipated by their enemies. The Vexani Collective discovered that their private diplomatic communications were being analyzed and countered before they could even be sent. Her voice grew stronger, more urgent. The pattern became undeniable. Humans controlled inter-system communications through their neutral relay networks that everyone had agreed to use for efficiency. Their trading companies had made themselves indispensable to galactic commerce, handling logistics and supply chains that connected every major civilization. Their peacekeeping forces were stationed at crucial strategic points throughout known space, always at the invitation of grateful local governments. The interrogation chamber's lights dimmed as the ship's power systems cycled through their regular maintenance routine. "We called an emergency council," Veltari said, her voice now barely above a whisper. "Every major species was represented. The ancient Chromalians sent their eldest prince. The machine intelligences of the Sigma Collective dispatched their most advanced diplomatic constructs. Even the mysterious energy beings from the galactic core agreed to attend. Every major power in the galaxy was present, except humans." Her laugh was hollow, devoid of any humor. "We didn't invite you. For the first time in 20 years, the galactic powers were going to meet without human observers, without human mediators, without human assistance of any kind. We thought we were finally going to have a private conversation about the human problem." Captain Deho's fingers stopped their subtle drumming against the table. "The meeting was held on Nexus Prime, in the most secure chamber of the council complex," Veltari continued. "Psionic dampeners to prevent telepathic eavesdropping, quantum scramblers to block electronic surveillance, even temporal shields to prevent time-based reconnaissance. We took every precaution we could think of." She paused, savoring the moment, before delivering the final revelation. "Somehow General Lim Do-hyun knew about the meeting anyway. 3 hours before we were scheduled to begin, he sent a polite message to the council secretary. He hoped our private discussion would be productive and constructive. He wished us well in our deliberations." Veltari's eyes locked onto Captain Deho's face. Then he included detailed notes on what each delegate had planned to say, word for word, including arguments that some representatives had only decided to make during their journey to the meeting. The silence that followed was deafening. The human intelligence network had become so pervasive, so deeply embedded in every aspect of galactic civilization, that the galaxy's most secret plans were known to Earth before the meetings even began. The invasion was never about conquest, Veltari revealed, her voice trembling for the first time since the interrogation began. Her silver scales had taken on an almost grey pallor, and her reptilian hands shook against her restraints. "Admiral Shin Ju-young's battle plans weren't meant to destroy humanity. They were meant to prevent you from achieving your final objective." Captain Deho leaned forward for the first time during their entire conversation, his composed facade finally cracking. "Which was?" Veltari's eyes darted around the interrogation chamber, as if she expected human surveillance devices to be hidden in every corner. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. "We found your archives. 3 months ago, a Zephyrian deep space reconnaissance team intercepted a damaged human courier ship drifting near the Kepler Nebula. The ship's crew was dead, killed by radiation exposure from a stellar flare, but their data cores were intact." She paused, her breathing becoming more rapid. "What we discovered in those files changed everything. Project Director Kang Min-jung's 1,000-year strategic plan, classified at the highest levels of human government. Complete galactic integration under human guidance, scheduled to be completed by the year 3125. Captain Deho's face went pale. "That's impossible. No government thinks that far ahead." "That's what we thought too," Veltari said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Every other species in the galaxy plans in terms of decades, maybe a century at most. But you humans? You think in terms of millennia. The documents we found weren't just battle plans or economic strategies. They were generational blueprints for reshaping galactic civilization itself." The ship's intercom crackled with routine status updates, but both occupants of the chamber ignored it completely. "The plan was beautiful in its simplicity," Veltari continued, her admiration mixing with horror. "Phase 1 was infiltration and information gathering, which you completed 20 years ago. Phase 2 was economic and cultural integration, making humanity indispensable to galactic civilization. You've been working on that for the past decade." Her scales darkened to an almost black color. "Phase 3 was what terrified us. Gradual assumption of control over galactic institutions, guiding the evolution of interspecies law, and slowly eliminating any culture that couldn't be absorbed into your vision of ordered civilization. Captain Deho's hands gripped the edge of the table. Eliminate how? Not through war, Veltari said quietly. That would be too obvious, too crude for human methods. The documents detailed how certain species would face natural disasters, solar flares that would sterilize their homeworlds, asteroid impacts that could be traced to random cosmic events, plague outbreaks that would appear to be evolutionary mutations. The temperature in the interrogation chamber seemed to drop several degrees. The Rigelian Federation was scheduled for an accidental reactor meltdown that would contaminate their entire star system, she continued. The Voidborn Collective would suffer a mysterious spiritual crisis that would cause their hive mind to fragment and collapse. The machine intelligences of Sigma Collective would experience random logic cascades that would destroy their consciousness networks. Veltari leaned forward as much as her restraints would allow. But the species that could be useful would thrive under human guidance. The Andromedians with their mathematical minds would become humanity's computational servants. The Carathians with their warrior culture would serve as your military enforcers. The Vexani crystal beings would become living communication networks, spanning the galaxy. Captain Deho sat in stunned silence, processing the implications of what he was hearing. The most chilling part was the timeline, Veltari said. Everything was planned down to the decade. By 2500, human-controlled corporations would dominate galactic commerce. By 2700, human-written laws would govern interspecies relations. By 2900, human culture would be the dominant force shaping art, philosophy, and scientific research across known space. Her voice dropped to a whisper. By 3000, there would be no truly independent alien civilizations left. Only client species, serving humanity's vision of galactic order. The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, arriving at their destination. Through the porthole, the lights of a human space station came into view. That's when we realized the truth, Veltari said, her eyes fixed on the approaching station. Humanity hadn't stumbled into galactic prominence through luck and hard work. Every success, every beneficial coincidence, every perfectly timed intervention, it was all planned, orchestrated across generations by minds that thought in terms of centuries rather than years. She turned back to Captain Deho, her reptilian features etched with genuine fear. We are all just pieces on a board, and only humans know the rules of the game being played. The Zephyrian invasion wasn't an act of aggression, it was an act of desperation, a last attempt to stop a plan that had been in motion since before most of us were born. The interrogation chamber door hissed open, and 2 human guards entered. They moved with quiet efficiency, preparing to escort the prisoner to her holding cell. As the guards unfastened her restraints, Veltari looked directly into Captain Deho's eyes. The invasion failed, of course. We were fighting against a strategy that had anticipated our every move decades in advance. Your defense fleets were positioned exactly where they needed to be. Your countermeasures neutralized our weapons systems with surgical precision. Even our retreat routes had been predicted and blocked. The guards helped her to her feet, but she resisted their gentle guidance for a moment longer. "Tell me, Captain," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber as they led her toward the door. "Did you really believe your rapid rise to galactic prominence was simply due to human ingenuity and hard work? Or somewhere deep in your heart, did you always know there was something more?" The door slid shut behind them, leaving Captain Deho alone in the interrogation chamber. The recording device continued to hum softly, its red light blinking steadily. In the silence, outside the porthole, the human space station grew larger as their ship approached the docking bay. Captain Deho sat motionless for several minutes, staring at the small recording device. His reflection looked back at him from its polished surface, the face of a human officer who had always believed he was serving the cause of peace and justice across the galaxy. Now he wondered if he had been serving a much darker purpose all along. The silence stretched on, broken only by the soft hum of the ship's engines and the distant sounds of docking procedures beginning. Captain Deho reached toward the recording device, his hand hesitating over the stop button. He wondered if he truly knew his own species at all. The end.